with regards to the Ronald Greene investigation. What we'll do here today is kind of go about some of the timelines, and as we discuss that, some of the processes involved, and from there, kind of speak to some of the changes we've made with our agency. But before I get started, I want to start by offering my sincere condolences to Ronald Greene's family. You know, for those of us that have children, just the thought of losing our child, regardless of how, can be a traumatic experience, a traumatic thought. And, you know, there's nothing that you can do to really replace that. So, you know, having, you know, contacted and spoken with the Greene family, I can feel their pain, and I feel it in my heart. So my heart goes out to them. I continue to lift them up in prayer and pray for them every day. As you can imagine, law enforcement is not an exact science, and it has been an ongoing process for the Louisiana State Police with other state and federal authorities to determine the appropriate time to release this video and all videos while protecting the integrity of the case and considering the due process of all of those involved. It's unfortunate that the path to get here today has taken this long, but we're at a point where we can hopefully provide you some information and offer some insight into the processes and developments as to the case and our department. We cannot comment on any of the conduct of the troopers related to this incident because the evidence of the conduct is under criminal investigation by other state and federal authorities, nor can I provide specifics with regards to the investigation for the same reason. That being said, some evidence has been released to the media without the approval of LSP, and that evidence is not being provided to the public in its full capacity or context. As such, today, we're releasing all of the video evidence maintained by LSP related to the custody and custody death of Mr. Ronald Greene. The Louisiana State Police had every intention, as we do for all public records requests, to release all required evidence and information as appropriate at the right time, and any suggestion otherwise is categorically false. It should be noted that all of the evidence was gathered by LSP investigators who began investigating this in-custody death in the early morning hours of May 10, 2019. Our investigators were notified at 1:30 a.m. and they arrived at the hospital at 2:25 a.m. Investigators met the involved troopers and documented their interaction with the troopers, as well as the condition of Mr. Ronald Greene at the hospital. Our investigators secured and obtained copies of the body-worn cameras and in-car cameras on the very morning of May 10, 2019. And these are the very videos that LSP will be releasing. Those videos were also released to the other state and federal authorities in conjunction with their ongoing investigations. LSP is routinely called upon to conduct a number of investigations regarding officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths in conjunction with the district attorney and grand jury and federal agency. Our investigative process for officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths have been validated throughout the judicial system. However, we continue to seek improvement to our processes so that we can achieve the best possible outcome for everyone involved. Our goal is to simply offer the facts based upon the interviews and evidence so that an arrest can be made or the district attorney may make the appropriate determination of adjudication. The officers who are subject to these investigations are afforded due process and deserve no more or no less than those involved in any other criminal investigation. When the incident involves our own personnel, there may or may not be administrative violations related to the incident. Regardless, you have my commitment that we will follow the facts and hold our personnel accountable. This process requires the department to balance the employee's criminal due process with their administrative investigation obligations. So, with regards to Mr. Greene's death, as it's been noted, May 10th, there was an interaction with Mr. Greene. As a result of that interaction, there was an in-custody death. We've taken and conducted a thorough investigation. We've also taken the information and provided to the other investigative agencies outside of our agency for them to conduct their investigation. That investigation, or those investigations, are ongoing. As a result of the incident, the troopers involved, including Mr. Trooper Hollingsworth, was sustained on the below violations with final disciplinary decision of termination. Sustainment on number 1, body-worn camera and in-car camera systems. 2, use of force. 3, unsatisfactory performance. 4, conduct unbecoming an officer. 5, lawful orders. Prior to Mr. Hollingsworth's termination, he succumbed to injuries sustained in a motor vehicle crash. Trooper DeMoss was sustained on the below violations and received a letter of counseling and letter of reprimand. 1, courtesy. 2, body-worn camera and car camera system. Trooper DeMoss has been notified of the department's intent to terminate and remains on leave pending the conclusion of disciplinary proceedings related to a separate excessive use of force investigation. These actions are in compliance with the rules of the State Police Commission. Trooper York was sustained on the below violations and received a 50-hour suspension. 1, treatment of prisoners in custody. 2, body-worn camera and in-car camera activation. Trooper York served his 50-hour suspension and returned to active duty pending the outcome of the review of federal and state authorities. We're always researching best practices and evaluating our own processes for improvements. I understand that the Greene family is grieving, and any loss of life is tragic, regardless of how. I realize that there is a great concern with regards to the incident. We share that concern anytime the actions of our employees are called into question. And even when use of force encounters are handled within the law and policy, it can be shocking to the senses. It is critical that we get it right. And when we don't get it right, we must hold ourselves accountable. Upon my appointment as superintendent in October of 2020, I promised to uphold the honor and integrity of our agency and our state. And I expect the same of every man and woman in our agency. I have pledged my unwavering support to our men and women, but I've also pledged to hold each and every one of us, including myself, accountable when our actions are not proper. During my tenure, I've made several changes in our rank structure, as well as policy and procedures. We've instituted a mandated multi-level use of force review by leadership and training academy personnel, and mandated that all use of force encounters be reported. Chokeholds and use of impact weapons to the head have been banned unless lethal force is authorized. Our primary enforcement personnel are required to wear body-worn cameras while on duty now. And initiation of administrative investigations have been expedited. We've also created new departmental operational program audits, installed new troop leadership at Troop F in Monroe, and increased diversity training among departmental leadership. But we've likewise increased diversity among that same leadership. We've implemented the Duty to Intervene program and implicit bias training for all employees, inclusive of myself. Misconduct, and I'll say this, misconduct in any form in our agency will not be tolerated. I will not accept it from my staff or any member of our agency. As investigations are completed, I assure you that we will administer swift disciplinary actions. I ask that during this trying time, the people of our great state and nation allow the Department of Justice and the other agencies to complete their investigation. We call upon the public to bring peace to our communities and permit due process to be upheld. But at this time, I'd also like to thank the leaders of our communities. You know, I've had some tough conversations with our community leaders, with our legislature, with some of our state representatives, such as Representative James and others. And I share their concern, and they have my commitment, and you all have my commitment, that we're going to do everything possible to make this agency the best public safety agency in the nation. Unfortunately, when we have these type of events, it takes this to realize the change in some cases that needs to be made. But again, I assure you that we are making significant change. We have made significant change, and we will continue to make significant change throughout our agency so that we can provide the best public safety and service to our communities, to our citizens, and to our visitors possible. I remain committed to it, and you have that commitment until the day I leave this post. As we move forward, we will continue to assess our agency, our personnel, our policies, and our procedures. And as we find whether it comes from an outside force or an outside source that we need to make change, then we're going to make that change. And we're going to continue to be the best agency possible. But I also want to speak to the men and women of the Louisiana State Police. We have some phenomenal people that are doing great things in our agency and in our state. They go out each day, they leave their families not knowing if they're going to return. And they do so committed to being the best. So I want to thank them for their service. I want to let them know that they have my support. But likewise, when they do not abide by those policies and those procedures, then I'm going to hold them accountable. And I remain committed to that. So, as I said before, we're going to be releasing the footage, all footage that we have here. We've provided video links that can be obtained from the LSP YouTube page, and I will provide that link. 1 second. You'll provide it. So now I'll take any questions you may have.
Yeah. Colonel, initially it was said that Mr. Greene died as a result of the injuries in that crash. How does something like that exist for so long within state police, and how do you regain the public's trust? Because the video doesn't seem to support that.
Well, obviously I wasn't involved in the initial investigation, so I can't speak to what was said initially. We gain the public's trust by being transparent, being consistent, and making sure that we're doing everything possible the right way to conduct investigations and do our duties. So, as I mentioned before, I remain committed to that. We have some great men and women, and I think as we continue to work on some of our policies, increase transparency in our agency, then I think we'll begin to work on building that trust with our communities. But it also goes to our interaction with our communities. As we interact with our communities, you know, we need to make full and take full advantage of the opportunities, regardless of the situation. Oftentimes when we meet people in the public, it may be a very bad day, whether you're receiving a ticket, or it could be the worst day of your life if you're involved in a fatality where you lost a loved one. So it's incumbent upon us to do our very best to comfort, to enforce with compassion, and to do our jobs. And I think as we do that, you'll see a change, and we'll continue to gain that trust in the community.
Colonel, do you think that any of the troopers should be charged at the state level? And have you already discussed this with the Union Parish District Attorney at this point?
Unfortunately, I can't speak to any of that because it's still under investigation.
Colonel, should Ronald Greene still be alive today?
Can't speak to that either. I wasn't there, so I really can't speak to whether or not he should or shouldn't. There are some extenuating circumstances, and unfortunately, I'm not a medical professional, so I can't speak to that.
Can you talk about why the medical examiner didn't get the documents that it had requested for the autopsy that was done in Ronald Greene?
No, ma'am, I really don't know why or when. I would have to look at that.
I mean, have you gone back with the folks who were involved in the initial days of the early investigation, when you obviously weren't in charge, to sort of suss out what they did and didn't do and how things got handled?
Some of those folks are now retired, so they're not compelled to speak with me about that. But it's for those reasons that I do not have full context of what occurred during those days.
Do you think that you will ever be able to get that full context?
I can't say whether I will or I won't, but I have set out to really assess every aspect of our agency, our processes, and as we move forward, I'm putting things in place, I'm putting policies in place to ensure that we do not have this happen again.
Colonel, you mentioned you were going to release that video just to add some context. Was there anything specific that you wanted the public to focus on when they see that?
Really, I want the public to move towards healing. You know, this has been a tragic event, and you know, when we look at Mr. Greene's family and all that they're going through, what I don't want is for, you know, this to keep resurfacing and bringing up those old wounds. This is something that we're obviously all impacted by and all affected by. I'm affected by it. And, you know, I think it's time for us to really take a look at what happened, for everyone to have as much factual information as possible. And from there, hopefully as a community, we can start the healing process and move forward from there.
There seem to have been several instances involving this specific troop. So can you talk about what you've done in the changes you've made specifically in the leadership of that troop to get at some of the problems that you found there?
Thank you for your question there. And yes, I've made some significant changes on my command staff as well as at the troop commander level. I found that it was important for us to change some things there, and it started with the troop commander. We've instituted a new troop commander there who's very passionate about service to others, about courtesy, about loyalty, and he's really set out to make sure that all of the troopers there are doing everything possible. We have some great troopers at Troop F, okay? And oftentimes when we have events like this where we have some bad actors, we cast everybody into a net without taking into consideration the other troopers that are going out there and they're really affecting public service the way that it's supposed to be done. And I think by changing that leadership, it's really helped us to, one, identify some of the issues we had, but two, start to change some of that. As we well know, when we have events like this that occur, although the event may happen one day or 2 days, to get there takes a while to build up. And it didn't happen overnight, we didn't get there overnight, and it's gonna take some time for us to really continue to build that culture to where we want it. Public service, courtesy, and loyalty. So making that initial change of that troop commander, making some changes in the policy has really put us on the fast track of getting us to where we want. But I really want everyone to embrace all of the great men and women, not only at Troop F, but Louisiana State Police as a whole, because they do great work. And while we may have a few bad actors, it's our job and it's my job to hold them accountable. And when we can't train, retrain, and get them to where they need to be and change that negative behavior to positive behavior, then it's my job to start the proceedings to remove them. And I think you've seen that I've taken those steps to make those changes. So we've changed some policies, and that troop commander that we have in place now is a phenomenal troop commander. I look forward to seeing what he's going to accomplish.
Colonel, you just mentioned in that answer, State Police may have a few bad apples. Do you consider the troopers seeing this video to be bad apples? Is that...
Well, I speak generally, and I don't want to sway anyone's mind towards any particular trooper. They have to go through there, and they're entitled to their due process. But, you know, at the conclusion of that due process, then we can make judgments as to whether or not they're bad apples.
And then a minute ago when asked how to regain the public's trust, you mentioned transparency a couple of times. Do you think up to this point with this case and just since you became superintendent that the transparency has been
Since I've been here, everything that I can push out, I'm going to push out. That's one thing that I find vital. When we talk about being transparent, communication is one of the key factors in really establishing trust in any community, in all communities. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be transparent as much as possible. Now, obviously, we have laws and rules and regulations that dictate some of our communications, but you have my commitment that if I can get it out, I'm going to get it out. If I can't tell you, then I'll say I can't tell you.
All right, thank you. We'll be pushing out some other documents right after this, along with the video links. Any questions you have, you can reach out to us.
Thank you all again. I really appreciate y'all coming on such short notice.